Hello, I'm Claire, welcome to my channel. So today's video is all about solar notes in perfumery. Where do they come from? What are they? And really, what was the first solar fragrance? I'm going to talk really all about the history of solar fragrances, and I'm going to tell you a story too, which is really part of the development of a major perfume company. So if you haven't seen me before, I'm Claire, and I talk all about fragrance on this channel. I talk about perfume science, perfume history, perfume psychology, and I also love doing perfume reviews and fun perfume tags. So if that kind of thing interests you and you haven't already done so, then please do consider subscribing. And please also press the like button if you do enjoy this video. And if you really enjoy it, then please press the hype button. So let's start at the beginning. What do I mean by a solar perfume? So I mean a perfume that makes you think of sunshine. A fragrance that makes you think of the sun. Something that's bright, something that's often warm, and something that perhaps makes you also think of summertime activities like going to the beach and being outside. So what in perfumery is going to give us that solar feeling, that solar accord? What's it made up of? Well, historically, the first solar fragrances were a complete accident. So back in the 1920s and the 1930s, there was a famous chemist called Eugène Schueller. He had a huge passion for sailing, he loved the open water, and he spent a lot of time on his boat. But what he didn't love was his sunburn. You may not have heard of Eugène, but actually he's really important in the story of perfumery in general. Eugène Schueller had started his own company back in 1907 when he'd been asked to develop a hair dye. He called the product L'Oréal, and he formulated and manufactured it himself, and by 1909 he'd started his own company. He snappily called this company La Société Française de Teinture Inoffensive pour Cheveux. So the French company of inoffensive hair dyes. But perhaps you've guessed it, with the name L'Oréal? Yep, he was going to rename his company eventually L'Oréal. Today the L'Oréal group is one of the biggest worldwide manufacturers of cosmetics and of course also of perfume. But back in the 1920s and 1930s, Eugène was just a very innovative chemist with a strong interest in solving everyday problems. So to solve the issue of his sunburn, Eugène Schueller wanted to develop a product that would both protect his skin from the sun, but also allow him to develop a golden tan. And for this, he developed a sun protection oil. Eugène called this product Ambre Solaire, which launched in 1935. The original formula only really contained very low efficiency sun protectorants. And actually, by today's standards, it was a pretty poor product. But at the time, this was revolutionary. There were people already developing sun protection products, and the same ingredients had been used in some products in Europe. The timing of the release of this product in France was really serendipity as well, because actually in 1936, there were some social reforms which actually allowed people holidays, vacation. Suddenly people had some free time to spend some time away from their home, to go somewhere. And what did they need? They needed sun protection. Ambre Solaire's sales went through the roof. The main sun protectant in Ambre Solaire was originally benzyl salicylate. Benzyl salicylate has a distinctive scent, and that was combined with rose and jasmine to create an overall pleasant aroma for the sun protectant. Ambre Solaire's immense success meant that people started to associate the smell with going on holiday, with sunshine, with being at the beach. And actually still for many Europeans, the scent of Ambre Solaire is still the smell of a holiday. And I think it's probably less so in the US because I think a lot of the sun creams and things are more based around the scents of coconut than florals as they are in the UK and Europe. But I still do think that Ambre Solaire is a very distinctive smell, and it does produce strong scent associations for a lot of people. So just a few years later, Eugène Schueller, keen to improve his product, realises there are better sun protection chemicals on the market. He can make his product safer. So he takes out the benzyl salicylate and he adds in some stronger sun protectants. What happens? His sales collapse. The product doesn't smell the same. And Eugène works quickly to put the benzyl salicylate back in, this time not for its sun protectant qualities, but because people love the smell of it. So how does benzyl salicylate actually smell? Well, it's described as sweet, oily, slightly spicy, balsamic, and with a floral and slightly caramelised aspect to it. It sounds like a real mix, doesn't it? But really its effects can be summed up in one word. It makes things smell radiant. It's bright. It's not very strong, but it's definitely something that persists. It's a long-lived scent. So naturally, benzyl salicylate is found in things like ylang-ylang essential oil, Peruvian balsam, in other tropical florals like frangipani and tiare, but also in carnations. So perhaps there is also a bit of an association with those tropical floral smells with what we think of as something very holiday-like, very sun cream-like. And that's perhaps where solar fragrances began. So benzyl salicylate was a very widely used perfume ingredient. It was used, for example, in the original formulation of Alien to give that very kind of otherworldly feel to that fragrance. But nowadays, benzyl salicylate is highly regulated, and that's because the EU have just declared it to be a potential endocrine disruptor. I do believe that it was already regulated by IFRA standards, and so its concentration had already been limited in fragrances. But from 2027, it will be further limited going forward in new fragrances, and existing fragrances will also have the limits imposed from 2028. So now let's turn to perfume. Of course, benzyl salicylate has been instrumental in informing our idea of what a solar fragrance actually smells like. But there are other types of notes and families even of fragrance that can really suggest that a fragrance might be solar. But of course, it's the overall composition, the overall feel of the fragrance that determines whether it's solar or whether it isn't. And that isn't something you can necessarily predict from the notes. So really what we're looking for are fragrance ingredients and notes that make us think of sunshine, that make us think of summer, that make us think of the sun. So of course the most obvious category here is going to be those kind of sunny, sunshiny florals. Anything that feels very light and bright and white or yellow is going to probably suggest the idea of something sunshine-like. So you might obviously think of things that are tropical, for example, tiare and frangipani. You might also think of jasmine or even orange blossom. And of course, you might also think of ylang-ylang, but maybe you won't think of things like mimosa, which are very polleny and yellow feeling. You might also think of really bright feeling citrus notes. So perhaps the softer citruses like bergamot or mandarin, but also maybe the stronger ones like lemon and orange. I think less obviously things like grapefruit can feel very sunshine-like. And also tropical fruits like pineapple can also feel quite bright and solar. One thing that you might not necessarily think of instantaneously, but that actually does make sense, is coconut. Because one, it makes you think of tropical islands, it makes you think of beaches, but it also makes you think of a creaminess and a whiteness. It makes you think of sun cream. Other white, creamy, milky notes such as sandalwood and even almond can also make a perfume feel solar. With the base, you might be expecting something warm, so resins, perhaps myrrh, perhaps benzoin, and also vanilla and obviously amber. Amber is something that does have a warm, powdery aspect to it, and that is something that also makes us think of those traditional kind of sun creams like Ambre Solaire. Of course, you might also find some dry woods in the bases as well, smells that make you think of driftwood perhaps. But really, I think the core aspects of a fragrance that you could class as solar are something floral, so something with white or yellow florals, something creamy, and something with a brightness to it. So let's now turn to fragrances. Which fragrances would I describe as solar feeling? Which are the really famous ones, the ones that really are the pillars that make up what we expect from a solar fragrance? And then also, which ones are the ones that I love? Which are the ones that are in my collection that I can't get enough of? I absolutely love solar fragrances. I think it's one of my favourite categories of perfume. And I honestly could buy so many more fragrances if I let myself, but I really try to limit my purchasing in this area because I know that I'm obsessed with this category of perfume. So the fragrance is often suggested as the first solar perfume. I'm not sure whether it is or whether it isn't, but the one that's said to be is Jil Sander Sun. So this is often described as a slightly herbal feeling, sort of vintage sun cream kind of scent. I haven't smelt this one, but it was released back in, I think, the late 1980s. And it's super cheap. You can get a bottle for under £10. And I think my curiosity has reached a point where I will just buy a bottle of this because I am just so curious to try this. But I know that this one is very much a love it or hate it fragrance. And a lot of people, I think, when they come to it, are not quite expecting how this smells. I guess because this is perhaps a fragrance that doesn't reflect the reality of how sun cream smells in places like the US. It doesn't really have that kind of coconutty aspect that I think a lot of people are used to nowadays with sun creams. It's more of a floral scent from looking at the notes. So yeah, that's Jil Sander Sun. I think the other one that is really super famous is one from Estée Lauder, and that's Bronze Goddess, which was released as a skin scent back in 2008. There have been loads of flankers, and I feel like the one that people absolutely can't get enough of is the Eau Fraiche, which was released in 2019. I've tried a few of these, and I do think that the Eau Fraiche is perhaps the most approachable of the ones that I've tried. It feels the easiest going, the most likeable. So Bronze Goddess Eau Fraiche is a combination of tiare, light citrus, vanilla and coconut. And that's what makes it just feel beachy, like a holiday, and just very much a solar kind of fragrance. Another fragrance that I think people might instantaneously think of with solar fragrances is Replica's Beach Walk by Maison Margiela. Like, this beach walk, though, is not in the UK, that's for sure. It's along a tropical beach. It's got very strong tropical florals, and those are what come through the most. It's very much that rather than anything more like sea-like. It does have a slight saltiness to it, but it's very, very mild. And it's something that also has some of that vanilla and also a very slight touch of coconut too. It's very musky feeling, and I think, again, that's a fragrance that a lot of people, when they first smell it, it's not how they're expecting it, because they're expecting something more sea-like, and it isn't that. It's more of a solar floral. So another classic choice would be perhaps Tom Ford's Soleil Blanc. This one has been incredibly popular over the years. Some people love it, some people hate it, because some people, I think, they just instantly think of sun cream, and of course some people don't like that aspect of the fragrance. But I think the EDP is very much more solar feeling than the EDT, although the EDT is also slightly solar feeling. This is really a big floral hit. It's ylang-ylang, tuberose and jasmine, and there's also some coconut here. But yeah, it does have a bit of a freshness in the opening. It has a little bit of a hit of a kind of pepperiness as well, which is something that I often associate with tuberose. But yeah, this one I think has been a huge hit for the brand. So that's Soleil Blanc. And then my final choice for the classics would be a more recently released one. This is a fragrance that I was incredibly impressed by. I often don't rate Penhaligon's fragrances because I often find that they are packed full of things that I don't like. And this one was just a breath of fresh air. It's called Solaris. It's got some beautiful solar feeling florals, but the opening is nice and bright and citrusy. It's got a really kind of fruity aspect to the opening. And the tiare and ylang-ylang make the fragrance very creamy and very yellow feeling. It's a beautiful tropical floral, very solar with some vanilla. So as much as I appreciate all of those fragrances and would welcome them with open arms into my fragrance collection, I do not own any of them. So these are the ones that I do own. So the first fragrance I would describe as a fluorescent yellow sunshine. And this is Reflection by Masca Milano. So this fragrance is not solar in an obvious solar floral kind of way. This is solar because of the brightness of the mimosa, because of the brightness of the citrus, because of the bright feel of the beeswax, and because of the aldehydes. The aldehydes give this an almost kind of white flash kind of brightness. It's something that feels fluorescent. And I think this is just an incredibly artistic and very distinctive fragrance. I think this is the kind of solar floral that feels very spring-like. It feels like the transition between green into yellow. And I think that kind of note combination makes this fragrance incredibly distinctive in the world of solar fragrances. It isn't an obvious solar fragrance, but it clearly is a solar fragrance. That's Masca Milano's Reflection. So the next one, again, I think is something that you could debate whether this is a solar fragrance or not, but to me it really overtly is. And that one is Sensuous. So I describe this as a clean, fresh skin kind of solar fragrance. There are aspects to this that tick the solar boxes. So the creaminess is really the biggest thing. So you've got that kind of creamy feeling sandalwood here. You've got that almost driftwood feel to this fragrance as well. But also you've got some quite distinctive florals here, although they don't come to the forefront, they are there. And those, along with the honey, give this a kind of sunny aspect. It's something that really makes me think of sunshine on warmed skin. And I think if you're looking for something that isn't a traditional kind of sun cream solar fragrance, this is a great one to check out. So that's Sensuous by Estée Lauder. So the next one I classify as my happy-go-lucky sundress fragrance. This one just always puts a smile on my face. It's called Jasmine des Anges and it's by Dior. This is from their Dior Privé line. And this one is just the one that always makes me happy. It just always makes me think of the summer and sunshine, it being warm outside and wearing cotton sundresses. It's something that just takes you to holidays. And this fragrance is really a combination between a very sweet feeling jasmine and also some honeysuckle. And that just makes me think of being in the garden. There's also apricot here. I also have an apricot tree in my garden. So I think really of my garden with this fragrance. And I think that's what makes me think of this fragrance as a solar fragrance. It's probably a personal association. But I do think this is a very sweet, non-traditional solar fragrance. That's Jasmine des Anges. So the next fragrance I describe as the wedding guest solar floral. So this one is Elisable Le Parfum. And this is really, I think, one of the best examples of white solar florals on the market. This one feels to me like white gold. That's what I imagine when I smell this fragrance, white gold. And I think that's because of the white honey here. There's a heaviness to this with the florals, with the honey, but there's also an airiness and a brightness and a solar aspect to this. So the orange blossom and the jasmine are what makes this solar, but there's also a grounding to this with some patchouli. It's a woody patchouli, a bit like a Chanel patchouli. It's a very classic, elegant feeling fragrance, but it definitely does have a solar aspect to it. So that's Elisable Le Parfum. So the next fragrance is one that I was gifted, and I think this one really exemplifies the idea of a creamy white solar fragrance. So this one is Madre Parola and it's by Grenado. So this fragrance is lots of florals. If you look at it in the listings, there's tuberose, there's orange blossom, and I think there's ylang-ylang. But ultimately, this is a creamy white feeling fragrance. The florals just add a creaminess. They're not distinctively individually smelt, at least after a few moments. It's something that really does pick up on the creamy aspects of the other notes. So there's sandalwood and also the tonka. And I think really overall what comes off is the idea of a creamy coconut. It's something that isn't listed, but that's what I get from this one. And that's why this one feels quite so solar. It's the creamy florals, the creamy coconut and the creamy sandalwood. It's clean, it's bright and it's solar. So that's Madre Parola by Grenado. So next, we can't have a solar fragrance video without talking about the queen of solar fragrances. Yes, it's Alien. This is an older formulation. I feel like Alien has perhaps lost its solarity a little bit. It's something that isn't quite as distinctively solar as it used to be. But I think in the older formulations, it's very starkly solar. So that jasmine comes off with the menthol aspect in the opening as almost a bright white light. It feels like a very otherworldly fragrance, and that's really what I think of. I think of almost like a bright white flash from a solar flare with this fragrance. It's got a power to it, and I think that's what makes this one so distinctive. So that's Alien by Mugler. So the next choice is another classic, and this one's from Guerlain. It's been rebottled now, but this original bottle really smells very golden feeling. It always makes me think of golden, sun-kissed skin. It's got that rich suntan cream floral feel to it. So it's mainly tiare along with some jasmine here, but it just does have this golden ambery sweetness to it as well. I think this one is very much for people who like that kind of 80s sunscreen kind of smell. And that is me all over. This one just takes me straight to holidays. It takes me to being little and to the expectation and the excitement of that. but it also just makes me think of somebody cruising around the Mediterranean. It feels luxurious, it feels rich, and I think you only really get that with the really old school feeling fragrances. That's Guerlain's Terracotta. The next one is called Elle l'aime à la folie, and this is a golden solar amber fragrance. So really, this smells exactly like the bottle looks, and actually this fragrance is a flanker of the original Elle l'aime. And I know Elle l'aime has coconut listed. I've never tried Elle l'aime, but even with this one, I imagine coconut. Even though it's not listed, I often feel like there must be something slightly coconutty in this fragrance. What makes this feel golden is the kind of oily feel of the ylang-ylang alongside the amber, and then also the myrrh in the base. This fragrance always makes me think of a golden sunset because of the golden feel of it. It's just so distinctive and so well done for its low price points. That's Elle l'aime à la folie by Lolita Lempicka. The next fragrance, again, I think is one that I think most people might think of as a solar fragrance, but I also think that there are aspects to this that take it outside the box of a solar fragrance. So this one is Memo's Martha, and this is really an orange blossom and tuberose fragrance. It's got a freshness to this because of the aloe vera. It's got a greenness to it, and that gives it a little bit of an almost watery aspect. There's also some phantom coconut here again. I often smell phantom coconut in fragrances, and this one is no exception. And I think that's the combination of the florals, the creaminess of the florals, alongside the sandalwood and also the vanilla in this fragrance. I just love this one. I think it's the all year round solar florals. That's Martha by Memo. So this last one was one that was gifted from Chloe, and this one is Atelier des Fleurs Vert Soleil. So I tried all four of this line, and this is the one that struck me as the most solar, and that's because it's got this really bright dual tone citrusy opening. It just feels very much like a ray of sunshine, and it's also quite sweet, and it's got a lovely rose aspect to this. It's almost like a rose water actually in the mid. And then in the dry down, there's a bit of a texture to this as well. It feels yellowy green because of the mastic here. And then there's a driftwood aspect in the dry down. It's something that just does make me think of a bright sunny day, perhaps near some water. There's something just intensely Mediterranean about this whole range, but this one especially just makes me think of Mediterranean sunshine. So that's Vert Soleil. So that's the final selection in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, then please do press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please do let me know your favourite solar fragrance and what you look for in solar fragrance. Are you someone who loves a creamier, more floral solar fragrance, or do you like a brighter and fresher feeling solar fragrance? Perhaps something less traditional. I'd love to know your thoughts. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.